Hey guys, can you guys hear me out there? Thanks for joining. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick Kinect Azure overview with NotchVFX, and we'll be able to kind of go through how to install and how to set it up, or at least go through the steps and explain those steps on how to get the Kinect Azure going within NotchVFX. Yeah, so I'm going to get going here. First thing that I'm going to do is we're going to go to the Kinect setup. And in here, this is the Kinect setup manual reference within the NotchVFX manual on their website. And if you guys go ahead and read through these instructions, you guys will go ahead and follow the instructions here, and you'll be able to kind of get this going. Before we get started, we're interested in this portion of it, and a couple things that you have to do before you actually get it working in Notch is one moment. So sorry about that. So a couple things that we want to do before we get it working in Notch. You want to go ahead and go to the Kinect or the Azure Kinect Sensor SDK page on the GitHub. If you guys look up here, this is kind of where you need to go to download it, and you want to go ahead and download the latest exe to install the Kinect SDK. With this, you're able to install and test to see if the Kinect is actually working with your computer. I know a lot of people have been having issues with getting their Kinect working along with the Skeletal, and also that's another important thing is within the Notch documentation they explain how to get the Skeletal data working. So maybe a lot of people just plug and play and think it's going to work. There's an extra step to get the Skeletal data working here. So to get that working, I'm going to go and show you guys the Kinect Azure viewer. And inside this viewer, you can confirm that the Kinect is working. So I'll show you guys how that looks. So once you open up the Kinect viewer, what you can do is you can go into the recordings or open device. In our case, we want to open the device. So once we open it, it recognizes that there's a device, and it gives you a serial number and a bunch of settings. We don't really need to worry about anything here. All we want to know is to make sure that our Kinect is actually working. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and hit start. And here we go. We have the Kinect working. So that's a good indication that the Kinect is going to work. So I'm going to go ahead and stop that and close that. The next step is, you want to make sure you download the Azure Kinect Body Tracking SDK and install it. Make sure you get the MSI file here. And with that, Notch kind of explains that here. Once you install it, you have to actually follow this file path, and you want to make sure you copy all of these files and DLLs into the Notch folder, and this will actually get you going to get that skeletal data. Great. So once you install that, if you guys need to troubleshoot other things or want to learn a little bit more about the Kinect or Kinects, this is a great source of information. So what I'm going to do here, we're going to go ahead and fire up Notch. So I'm going to get rid of this for now. So once we get Notch going, the next thing we'll do is we'll just start with the blank page. I'll call this Kinect, or I should call it a blank layer. So once we have the layer open up, one of the things that we need to make sure to do first is go into the devices. Inside of devices, you want to go to the video in camera and Kinect settings. And this is kind of where you'll be able to enable, depending on the Kinect, or if you're using an Intel camera, you can select that here. Notice that Kinect 1, 2, and 4, or at least Kinect 1 has different settings. And with the Kinect 1, you're able to use up to 4 Kinects on your machine. Each one plugged into individual USB, not a USB hub or anything like that. So what we'll do here is we'll go to Kinect 4. We'll enable that, and as soon as we enable that, we start getting the sensor ID here, and it knows that it's active, and also my Kinect lights turn on. Also, if you want skeletal data, go ahead and enable the skeletal data. That data is here. So if you want that data, you want to actually enable this, otherwise you won't get the skeletal. So once we have that going, we've enabled the Kinect. I see the Kinect on within my view. I see the lights indicating that the Kinect has initialized. So I'm going to search for depth. And if you go to input output, you want to select the depth source. So this is kind of the initializer, or the node that actually brings the Kinect depth data into your node graph and into your notch file. So to make sure that we're actually receiving something, we can preview and viewport. And as you can see here, this is capturing me, and we have a Kinect working within NotchVFX. You also have other settings here. If you want, a wide angle, you can select that, and you can see a wider angle of my room here. And you can also select the texture size of the RGB stream coming in. So if you're looking to do high quality RGB, or you want very good definition, you probably want to increase this. Obviously, the higher you increase these things, the more latency things will add to your actual graph. So I'm going to go back to my actual narrow angle, just to kind of get more of a narrow look. And within here, you have a couple options. You can explore a lot of these, but one of the most important ones in this one is being able to threshold your background. And with this, you can crop out the background and cull it to kind of remove some of that background information. You can also do a near clip. So if you want to, if there's something too close, like maybe there's like a mic or something here, you can kind of threshold that out as well. So you have those options. And they have other options here. You can explore those on your own. But I'm going to keep going here. So the next thing we'll do here is what we'll do is bring in the 3D mesh inside of Notch, and you want to go ahead and type in Kinect. And within the Kinect, you want to go to geometry, and you want to select depth camera, and you want to bring that in here. You can connect that to your root. I clicked Control R to connect that. And you want to grab that and bring it into the first inlet of your actual geometry Kinect depth node. I hope you guys can hear me perfect out there. Let me know if you guys have any issues, and I can try to figure something out. So once we have our depth data coming in, we've piped it into the 3D geometry Kinect source, and we can see here kind of that it is in 3D, and once it's in 3D, you can treat this piece of Kinect node as your actual piece of geometry. So once we have that going, we can actually start creating some effects with this. I guess the first effect that we'll do is I'll start with the particle system, and we'll start emitting particles within the scene based on our mesh. So I'm going to select a particle root, connect that, and a mesh emitter. This will actually emit particles from your Kinect geometry. And I'm going to bring, I'm going to bring in a point renderer to visualize those points that are being generated via the vertices of your actual Kinect mesh. So if you can see here, we now have these particles, and if we make the scale size a little smaller, you can see it a little better. One thing to note is you want to go into your depth camera, and this is right now what I'm doing is if I disable this, you're viewing this depth camera node, and you kind of want to disable that unless you want that, but I usually disable it and then I'll enable my particle system unless you want both or you're doing an effect that's actually requiring that. So you can see here, I now have particles being emitted from my actual mesh, and you can kind of see those move around. So that's interesting. There's a variety of different things that you can do with this. I've been exploring a little bit of these. The only one that gives me the best best spawn mode is vertices, but if you do polygons, you get, it emits from the top. I'm not sure if there's like an offset or a seed that you have to like move. Haven't explored that far. You can go to edges. It does a similar thing. Vertices follow edges. That does something a little different. I'll have to, I can't really tell you what the difference is, but vertices follow edges. So maybe the particles follow the vertice edges. So once we have that, I'll go ahead and start doing, a basic effect. One thing also, I'm trying to orbit around my object or my mesh. Right now, it's not in the middle. So something that I like to do is you have your pivot point or your pivot distance, and I like to set that to 0.5, and that kind of brings it in the middle of your origin. And it's better to kind of create, but even if you move back, that kind of keeps it there, which is pretty cool. Makes it a little easier to kind of work with. I guess while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and maybe add some effectors. And before I keep going, what I like to do actually is I like to start with a base. So I'm actually going to call this base. And I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that. And the way that I like to set up my node graphs when I'm kind of creating content in real time and just exploring is I always like to have a very base layer and kind of just like my initialized layer, so that if I want to go back and recreate something or start from scratch, I kind of have that, and I don't have to set my my layers again. I mean, it's a couple nodes in there. It's not that hard, but I prefer not to have to redo work. Anyways, while I'm here, I'll kind of explain something else. So if you guys notice here, we've added our far clip plane all the way to the back. There's a couple of things that you can do here. They have a vertex randomization, so you can randomize a vertex. I really don't know what this would be for, but if anyone knows, please let me know. I would like to know. Another thing that is good to know here is the max edge length actually reduces the edge length that connects your foreground point cloud to your background. So if you just kind of reduce that, you can kind of remove that. Those are just some small tips here. Another thing actually is material. So if you want to materialize this and you add a material here, it actually won't really do anything. And it took me a while to figure out, but if you go in here and you actually do the color amount, you bring that up, that should allow you to color it in a different color once you start processing it. That way you don't actually have, that way you don't actually just have it have the texture on there. So, you can go ahead and do that. I'm gonna go ahead and leave that color in there. Also, if you do want to change the color, you can do it here. I'm not sure why you would do that, but the options are there. So let's go back to my actual color here. And I'm going to threshold this as well. Cool. And you can kind of see my wall, so I'm going to threshold a little more. So let's go back to our particle, and I'm going to name this Kinect particle. So now that we have a particle layer, let's try to make something a little more interesting and go about how we can kind of use this data to create a more appealing look. So I'm going to grab a velocity here, and I'm going to go ahead and start pushing some particles in Z space. Right now they're really fast. Also, one thing that is very important is you want to lock your fixed update rate. Otherwise, a lot of people, when they render out these Kinect looks, or really any particle system, if you render your particle system without it being locked, you're going to get different results when you render them out because of the way that it renders out of frame. So a good number to start out with is 60 FPS. And another important thing too is you want to lock your frame rate to 60 FPS. And then this will lock the particle system in your actual timeline your timeline frames to the 60 FPS that you've added. I'm going to go ahead and save this. And I'll post this file later on so that you guys can have access to it. So we're slowly starting to get something. One of the looks that I recently was exploring is just kind of playing with particles and seeing what kind of effects I can get. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just add like a little vortex. And with this vortex, you can start seeing how that's kind of spinning, my particles around. So I'm actually going to move this back because I don't want it to disturb the first spawn. And I'm going to increase this a little bigger, bring it back. So you can start seeing you're getting like this little vortexy effect. Maybe that's too fast. Another tip, something that I really like to do as I'm kind of exploring with particles, I really like to, instead of slowing down my velocity amount here, I like to increase my fixed update rate. So maybe we'll go to 2 or multiply by 2, and you now get a much slower, smoother motion, and it's not so rapid. Another thing too is I want a little bit more particles here. So I'm going to go ahead and just, maybe add 250,000. With this, you'll get a little bit more definition within your point cloud. And you can kind of see that already. You have more. But in order to get more, you actually have to increase the particle count. So I'm just going to add 250,000. And now you can see how there's better definition, and it's a much thicker, emission, and you get more definition. So as you're doing this effect, you can start seeing how you can take a lot of particles and get more definition out of. So something really cool here. As you start doing that, right now there's no lighting, but you can also add lighting. What I'll do here is I'm going to increase this a little bit more, maybe make it go faster. Let's add a curl noise. And like I said, a lot of the times, a lot of people just drop in these effectors, but it's really cool to explore what the parameters do, just so that you get a feel of what the effector does. If you don't play with the parameters, it will your effects or your looks will kind of all look similar a lot of the times. So I would suggest exploring and playing with these parameters, to get a different effect. So as you can start seeing here, we're starting to get kind of like this flowy little effect, and yeah, it's pretty interesting. So I'm going to move on real quick. That way we can show you other effects or other ways of creating content. But maybe I'll just add a different one last effect here, and kind of move on. One of them that's pretty cool is you can take your shockwave I kind of was playing with this one yesterday, and maybe you want to increase this much larger. Actually, let's bring it a little smaller and push it back. That way, you're not affecting your spawning emission, which is like the front, and you can kind of still see definition here. What's up, Mike? Thanks for joining, man. Yeah, so in another tip is if you don't actually want your clones to be colored, just go to your mesh emitter and deselect this vertex color, and then now you'll be able to get just pure color, and you can start adding a live color shading if you would like, and start getting different a different color effect. You can also use voxel cone and all of those effects to make it look better, or all those renderers. Yeah, so I'm gonna remove this and I'm gonna go back to what I had. Maybe make my wave size a little bigger, and you can start seeing that it's affecting a little better there. You're getting some interesting effects here. Cool. So I'm going to duplicate this guy, and the next part is I'm going to go ahead and show you a little bit of kind of how to get this stuff in with 3D particles, or using cloners to have 3D particles. So this is pretty straightforward as well. You can take a clone to particles, grab your particle root, add it in here, and you want to go ahead and add a 3D shape. The 3D shapes are going to be really, really big, and also you're only going to get a little bit spawning, so I would recommend that I mean, depending on what you're going for, but sometimes I match the amount of particles that I'm emitting from my particle system to my clone emitter, and then this way you can actually see every particle that's being emitted in 3D. And here I'm just gonna go with the box. It seems like it's really heavy if you do if you just use a sphere because of the vertices. Another thing here is if you want color, make sure you select your color clone, and this will actually color the clones of your mesh emitter. So now you can see that we have 3D mesh rendering, and with this you can take a light and start lighting it just like you would do to light 3D objects. So here we go. Cool. Yep, nothing special. I'm not going to really take time to make things look pretty in this demonstration. It's purely just to show you guys how to kind of get this going, and really start to see how to use this data to actually create something. Maybe do some. One thing to note too is you have your particles actually rendering, so you want to make sure you turn those off unless you're actually needing those. That way it doesn't disrupt the actual look that you're going for. I'm going to restart this, and I'm going to go from above. And now you can see how this is in 3D space. So the next thing we'll do is we'll play a little bit with fields and see how we can take our Kinect mesh and create some fields with it. So as I mentioned, I like to start with my base layer. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that. And let me name it. I'm going to rename it. So another one that's pretty straightforward. You want to go into your fields here, and you want to select the field root. Connect that to your notch root, and I'm going to go to 256. This will actually create a volume of the field. That way you can actually generate fields within this volume. Depending on your machine, you can bump these with height and depths, but it will get really heavy really quick. So let's get the 3D object emitter, and I'm going to go ahead and get the Kinect node. And as I mentioned earlier, since you're rendering this, you want to turn it off. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off, and with here I'm going to get a field renderer, and this will actually allow you to visualize what you've created. So now you can see that I'm a field at this point. It doesn't look too pretty, but we'll start adding effects and lighting to it to make it look good. So right now you can see how this field kind of is working. One thing that I'll start doing is I'll start to add some lighting, and inside your rendering you can select lighting. And in order for this to work, you obviously have to make sure that your deferred rendering is all on. Otherwise, the fields won't work. So let's get some lights in here. One thing that I like to do is I always like to, not all the time, but sometimes if I just want to check out how some quick lighting is going to work without having to add too much effort, I take my root node and I target it to the light. And now whenever I move this, it will always kind of target towards the origin of the scene. To get to field lighting, you obviously have to pipe in the field lighting here. And you can start seeing that, I'm a volumetric field. And this starts to look really cool. Let me add a couple more lights, and then we'll start kind of affecting it. This is purely just to make something look okay. As I mentioned, I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to make this stuff look good. It's just pure demonstration, but it's always nice to have something that looks okay. Okay, almost there. If you guys have any questions, let me know, and I can try to answer them for you. Great. So some basic lighting. What you can see here is, you can start seeing me becoming this puffy thing. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and start affecting this to get some different effects. So I'm going to go ahead and add some turbulence. You can see that goes really fast. The fields are a little tricky. They go really fast. You can always reduce the speed, but then you won't get that effect that you're looking for. They're similar like the particle systems where you want to make sure you lock your update rate. And right now, we can lock it to 60. You can always lock it higher or lower. I like to go higher because it gives me a smoother effect. As you can see here, we're getting a much smoother effect. We can even bump this up and it's a little slower. Obviously, it's still going to spread out a lot. Another thing to kind of solve for that is I like to increase the color fade to, like, I don't know, 50, depending on kind of how your motion is for your effect. So here you're starting to see I'm getting a little bit of a smokier look. Maybe 50 might be too high. Maybe let's try 40. It's getting a little better. And maybe I'll add a fluid effector and increase this a little bit. I like to add a tiny bit of diffusion, not a lot. The diffusion is nice because it kind of blends it together and you get less aliasing. But literally like 0.002 or less, it's got to be a really small, fine number. Another thing too is you can always increase the dampening, and this will dampen also kind of what's happening. Unless you want a little bit more smoke, maybe you can go to 25 and this will be a little bit smokier, right? So here we go. Simple effect, nothing crazy. Maybe we can bring up our curl noise a little bit more, see what happens. Bring that down. Cool. So that's kind of how you get the fields working with your object emitter. Another effect that you can do is, this is kind of an interesting one. I'm going to go ahead and turn my curl noise off and also my fluid effector. And you can now generate these like little cubes, which is pretty cool. And they're generated based on your motion. So if you can see here, I have these 3D cubes that represent me. But if you increase the voxel resolution, you'll start getting better resolution. It's kind of like a little Minecraft effect. It's pretty interesting thing. You can increase the resolution higher. Maybe let's go to 80. And you start seeing a little bit more of this cubic, effect, which is kind of cool, I think. Nice. Cool. So that's kind of fields. The next thing we'll go ahead and do here is we will add a cloner and start playing with clones. I'm going to duplicate my base and well, that's not my base. Take my base here and I'll just call this clone. And with this one, we're just going to go, use a clone mesh and, start cloning objects onto our 3D mesh. So what we want to do is take the clone here, go ahead and add this guy in there. Once again, you want to make it invisible and get a shape 3D. I usually start with cubes. It's up to you what you're going for. But cubes are always a good start. They render a lot. They render better than a sphere just because of the vertices. So what we'll start here by doing is making them smaller. You're starting to see a lot of noise here. So in order to fix that, well, one thing is we need more clones. So I'm just gonna add, 1,000. And you can see they're not really distributing, which is kind of interesting. So in order for them to distribute, you have to hit randomize mesh order, and this actually will start to distribute them for you. I'm going to add a couple just lighting effects to visualize what we're doing. So you have to make sure that that you distribute your actual points. Your randomized mesh order in order to get them to work, because otherwise if you don't, they'll just be kind of on top I think at one point I kind of was messing with, no, not this one. I thought it was a seed. Anyways, so you got the mesh order. You know, slowly have this working. And, you know, you can also color the clones by their color. And you can do this. And you can also just use any effector to kind of affect that clone. Make it a little smaller. Maybe add a math modifier to kind of just move it in space for me. That way I don't have to move it around manually. It's a little fast, so let's slow that guy down and make him, there we go. Also, if you guys like to visualize, if you guys want to visualize your bounding boxes and things as you're playing, if you go to View, you can go ahead and select Show Bounding, or where is it? Right here, Show Bounding Boxes and Range Indicator while playing, and this will actually allow you to see this stuff as you're playing the viewport. Something pretty cool. So I'm just gonna, I'm not gonna do anything crazy here, just to kind of showcase what's happening. You can always add more clones. I'm not sure what will, there we go. You can add way more clones and you get more of a thicker mesh. And you can reduce a little bit of that jumpiness. If you add more, it kind of hides it a little bit. So that's the cloner. We can do an example with procedurals next. Let's duplicate our base. Okay. So let's go to our procedural section, and you want to grab a procedural root. You also want to get a mesh, procedural mesh, and you want to grab a 3D object, and you want to give it your 3D object in here. I'm going to go ahead and hide my my mesh inside my geometry node for my Kinect, and I'm not seeing anything here, which is kind of weird, but the reason why is because you need there's a couple things you have to do, and one of them is add a bounding box. So let's add a bounding box override, and I also like to add the bounding box to my mesh here. And I mean, we have that going, but it's still not showing up. One of the reasons why is because if you have an animated object in 3D space and you use this 3D object in procedurals, you actually have to enable animated SDF. Otherwise, you will never see this. You'll never get to see your moving mesh within your procedurals. So that's just a tip there to make sure you can enable that animated SDF here to to see that. So here's that, and inside your procedural meshings, I usually like to turn this to 1,000, and it gives you a better error tolerance. And also, if you want to smooth your mesh, you can smooth it here. It's a little noisy. What you can do too is you can increase this. Obviously, this costs performance, so it's up to you on how you want to do that. You can also smooth it, but you get like these little weird effects. Are artifacts, but that's really up to you. I guess distance fields gives me a better result here. Oh hey Aaron, Aaron wants more cats. Yeah, I had to kick my cat out, otherwise he will literally just block the camera and take all the attention. So kind of had to lock him out. So anyways, so this is kind of, our procedurals. One of my favorite things to do with procedurals and with this effect is I actually like to bring in or use the clone procedurals. That's currently one of my favorite effects. Better than just clone to mesh, I actually like to take my meshes, bring them into procedurals, and then clone onto that. You just get better options or a much better effect to kind of visualize clones onto your mesh. And I'll show you guys that in a bit. Same with this one, you definitely need to put the bounding box, otherwise it won't render. Once again, I'm going to start with 3D shape. It's going to be really, really big. So what I'll do is make it smaller, and you can either make it smaller here or within these parameters, or you can just go ahead and make it smaller here. So I'm not seeing, oh, there we go. My clones are very, very small. So now that I have my procedurals going into my clone to procedurals, I'm actually going to turn off my clone to procedurals or my procedural meshing. I don't need to visualize that. So you can see here now, we can start to see some actual cubes. Nothing, there's not a lot of them, but you want to increase these values. I think I went to 540 by 540, and then you can start seeing some definition here. So as I mentioned earlier, I prefer to drive my 3D mesh, clone my 3D meshes with procedurals instead of just like the regular mesh. The reason why is you get some pretty interesting effects with this down here. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and increase these, maybe make them a little bigger, and you can start seeing. Actually, I'm going to add a little bit more lights to make it look a little better. So give me one moment. I need to turn all these on again to actually get shadows. So there we go. Let me turn this off and adjust my light better. Smooth that up. I'm going to restart this guy as well. Maybe give me a side light. And turn on the shadows here. So start getting a little more definition, nothing too crazy. Maybe bring this up a little bit. Once again, you can get your color, well, the reason if you select color clones here, you actually won't get them because there's no color coming from this mesh. Unless you change that color, then you can. But where it gets really interesting is if you put the color ramp effector. And with the color ramp effector, you can take your color ramp and feed it a couple different colors. Depending on what your favorite colors are, what you want to do, and you can either go to fractal noise. That can kind of give you something interesting. The one that I like to do is Z-space. The reason why is because it kind of chops up my my colors in layers. So you'll kind of see that in a bit. You got to select repeat and do that. Also, I think I have to spin it or rotate it here. Oh, there we go. That's fine. So what I need to do is There we go. So you got to increase the value. You can offset it. The more colors you add here, the more layers you get. So you can see how I can start layering different colors and start getting different effects. So depending on, like I mentioned, your favorite colors here, mine are kind of, you know, these hues here. Okay. So as you can see here now, I am in, let me throw an ambient light so that we can actually see a little bit more of this. There we go. So as I mentioned, one of my favorite things about the procedurals is that you can actually start messing with these distance right here, these distance options, and you can get some really interesting looks. So you can, you know, make these smaller, you know, make this distance a little bigger, and you start getting these really, really nice kind of layered effects. As you can see here. I'm going to throw some ambient occlusion to get a little bit of shading in there. There we go. So kind of like a little layer of colors, and if you just keep, you know, modifying these sizes or, you know, the distance as well, that kind of gives you these like interesting effects. So you can see here, you know, I'm a thicker type of cloner guy. And so yeah, so that's kind of with procedurals, and you know, just like everything, you can always use more of these clones, and you know, get more effects within that. So I don't know, maybe I want to get a 3D primitive and throw that in there, make it a little smaller, and also maybe, you know, move it in space real quick. Maybe give it a, you know. That's too fast. You know, maybe it's a pyramid. I don't know, whatever your favorite thing is. You can see that pyramid is too big. Box, how big is this box? What you can do too is you can actually subtract them as well. So if you go in here and select some of these blend options, maybe we'll do a smooth subtract. Let's see what happens here. You can start seeing that will subtract my character. So, you know, kind of interesting. Or you can do just a regular subtraction, which, you know, does something like that. Or I can just do an intersection and change this back to a sphere. Actually, intersection doesn't do anything, I guess. Maybe my order of operations is different. You can do that, and you can also use the effectors. So maybe what I'll do is I'll add a cloner effector, and this will just be like a ripple. I'll take the movement of this guy, and then I'll just give it to that guy as my effector. And then here I can, you know, maybe add a couple offsets. Whoa, gets a little crazy. Maybe reduce the speed of that and animation. And also the size of it's probably way too big. And that seems like it's moving super far. Cool. Hopefully there's people out there watching this. If not, I will post it online, and people will get to see it later on. So you can kind of see here, there's, depending on what you're looking for, you can do some crazy stuff. That's too much for me, to be honest. I can't really make anything look nice really quick, but this is just like an overview for you guys. Cool. So that's procedurals. The next thing that I'm going to show you guys is I'm going to show you guys how to get the skeletal data working. That way you can actually start moving some actual FBX models that are rigged. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to name this Procedural. Save that. And I'm going to clone my base again. So the one thing about the Kinect skeleton is, you can get the Kinect sensor working by itself, but if you don't install the Kinect Skeletal SDK and download their DLLs into the Notch folder, you're not going to be able to get the Kinect Skeletal. So to get the Kinect Skeletal, let's go ahead and type in skeleton. Grab the Kinect for skeleton, and what we want to do is we want to bring in a 3D object or a FBX that's rigged. So let me go ahead and open that. One moment here. Oh, I think I imported it as a wrong size. One moment, let me get rid of this and do this again. Uh, 0.01. So I'm going to go ahead and connect. So what we have here is we just have this Mixamo model that I downloaded. I think it's pretty appropriate right now because of of what's happening in our world. Trying to stay decontaminated. So you can see my Kinect here. There's already data here. You guys can see not anymore. But what I'll do is I'll connect this is my imported actual skeletal map, which is my FBX that I downloaded from Mixamo, and it's properly rigged. So I'm going to go ahead and throw that guy in there. And what we can see here is now that I have him in there, I can hit play, and you can see that that guy is following my movements. Oh, that's pretty cool. It's actually mapping exactly on top of me. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to turn this guy off. And to get the skeletal working, you just have to make sure you enable the Kinect skeleton here. That way you can grab it, and you'll be able to kind of do this effect. So I'm here, and I connected my 3D scene, which is my imported FBX. So as you can see here, this is actually kind of following me already. Obviously, it's got to see your entire body so that you can actually maneuver it around. If you get too close, you see that it loses the legs. My hands are still there, but if that's out of place, it'll just start losing. It's still detecting my head, but it's getting really weird. So you just have to make sure that when you use the skeletal, you want to be able to, to make sure the camera sees your entire body. Otherwise, you'll get some weird stuff going. So this is cool. I'll just do a quick little particle system to show you just how to kind of do something with this, besides just controlling a character. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel this for now, and I'm going to go in here and just select Mixamo so that I can actually see the proper character. And I'll go ahead and just create a little particle system so that we can see how this will work. So I'll just put point render, and I'm going to go ahead and add a primitive. Obviously make this a lot smaller because it's too big. Cool. And make these points smaller. So one thing that, I want to control this particle system with my hand. So what we'll go ahead and do is parent that particle system to the hand of this character. That way you can move it as you're controlling it. One thing that I like to do is I just like to visualize things. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to find the hand, depending on what you're trying to put it on. Maybe it's the foot, maybe it's the head, maybe it's the knee, wherever you want to parent the objects that you're trying to control. I'm just going to do it here on my right hand. So as you can see here is we now have that sphere attached to that hand, and it's moving with it. So depending on what joint you're trying to put it on, you can go ahead and do that. Maybe we want to put it on the wrist, or just the main hand itself. Maybe the fingers or something. Yeah, I'll do the finger. So with this now, actually what I'll do here is I'll just do like a null. Well, doesn't really matter. I already have that position, so I'm actually just going to grab the position of that of this sphere, and I'm going to attach it to the particle system. So to do that, I got to go in here, and I need to give it this. So now you can see that my particle system is in the hand. I'm actually going to turn this off for now. You can also just go direct from that, from these into your particle system transform modifier, or you can just do it however you want, really. I'm just kind of showing you guys how to put that together. As I mentioned earlier, make sure you lock your frame rate. Right now it's too fast. Maybe I'll do it ×2. Gives me a smoother effect. Maybe give it some color. Maybe add it a little bit. Okay, and let me give it some more particles. Great. So I think this will do just for this example. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on my, enable my skeletal again. And what we'll do is, we'll go ahead and start kind of puppeting this guy. And you can see I now have this, particle system attached to my hand. Let me get a better view here. Actually, I'll do 2 just to put one on my other hand. One moment. Mike Estasio is asking, does the model have to be in T-pose for the Kinect to recognize the points to bind to the skeletal, or will it do it automatically for any rig model? If you download it from Mixamo, they should all work because they actually have the proper rigged skeletal model. So as long as you model your character to the Mixamo hierarchy, then Notch should read it. That's one of the most important things is, maybe upload your character to Mixamo, rig it, and then download it. And that will actually get your, your character to, that will actually get your, the proper rig so that you can actually control it with a Notch. Yep. So I'm going to put another one of these on my other hand. So I'm just going to go, where did I grab this from? I guess it doesn't matter. I'm just going to pick a finger and I can just, grab this and go directly into the transform. Doesn't matter which one unless, you want to specify yourself. So at this point, I have two of these, but if you notice, one of them is emitting more particles than the other. So something that I've learned to do is I'm using 64,000 particles. So what I'll do is I'll just select both of them and divide by 2. So what this will do is it'll each one will take 50% of the particles that you're supposed to emit. And that way you get a similar stream from both particle emitters. So now you can see that, I have particles emitting from the similar particle density from both points. I'm going to repel this. And I'm going to go ahead and enable this again. And I will put my guy in view. So there we go. We now have skeletal tracking, and you're taking the joint and actually moving that particle system around. So you can create a lot of amazing effects with this. I mean, one effect people really like is that plexus look. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw in that line connection render, and I'm going to select this guy and reduce the amount. Maybe, give it some glow because glow is the best in the world. It makes things look awesome. Obviously my character is also glowing. You don't want your character to glow. So what I'm going to do here actually is I'm going to disable this. I'm going to do a render layer. Render my particles and give it the glow just to my particles themselves. Also, you want to disable alpha because if you don't, you notice how you get some black around your alpha there. It's kind of a little messy. So let's disable that. Disable the alpha. You have these particles now, and yeah, there we go. So there's skeleton working for you. Aaron said, me too, Berto. Curious if you have issues with skeletal tracking being wonky. We played with it. It was pretty bad in Notch compared to the SDK viewer. I mean, from what I know, Notch should just literally be taking that data and just piping it in. I don't think they're doing anything with it. They're literally just using the SDK and DLLs that come with the SDK. I think the biggest thing here is, you have to make sure you are in frame. Otherwise, as you can see, when I get closer to the camera, it loses my legs and my hands, and it starts to get a little weird. So that's the biggest recommendation is, make sure you actually cover your entire body. Right now I'm about 6 feet away from the camera, and that's barely cutting it. What you really need is you need more space to get that going. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. I'm gonna go ahead and save this. I'm gonna give away this file, and I'll upload it to my Gumroad, and you guys can watch it. If you guys have any more questions, please ask. What I'm gonna do next is I'm actually gonna show you guys some effects that I've been working on. You've probably seen some of these online. Maybe you haven't, but it's just something a little bit more dialed in. But they still need a lot of work. They're not 100% done already, but yeah, you should be able to just get an idea of kind of looking at something different. Aaron is asking if I'm on build 103 most recent. Yes, I am. I think you have to be on the most recent, otherwise the Kinect Azure won't work. I think they did an update for the Skeletal recently, which is why they pushed a newer build recently, which is 103, I believe. Let me close this. Cool. So these are kind of just similar effects to what I was showing you guys. Just with I spent a little bit more time on these, but these aren't obviously are definitely not done. Just to kind of show you guys something different. This one's using procedurals as well in fields. So there's multiple ways of actually controlling this. Velocity. I can this velocity is being controlled from my field effector, not from the cloner or anything like that. So this kind of affects it in that way, and we can also dial this effector a little bit different and get some different results depending on what you're looking for. So that's just taking fields, piping them into some procedurals, and cloning on top of that one with the ripple that just moves through this object. Right now, I have the sphere visible, but I can turn that off. And you can kind of see here how you can see that effect working. So that's that's using level set field level sets into procedurals. I'm just gonna go through these real quick. This is another interesting one. This one is some SPH, and it's kind of like fluidy, watery, and I'm giving it like a beat pulse. So you kind of get this like, static. Once it's done pulsing, it's like the staticky, watery, spilly effect. This other one is kind of like a little webby. So it's like I'm using similar effects, and you can see here how the cubes also have like a little bit of a web effect. You might not be able to see it because of the compression, but yeah. Another effect here is I have the fluid, or I should say the field smoke, and this one's a little smoky. So you can see my face definition there. And as I move around, it's pretty smoky. You can see that. This is similar to the other ones. Something that I really like to do is sometimes I just like to pause it and just check out some cool shots and take some screenshots and add some depth of field for that. To be honest, I don't even know what this is. I have files and files that are just random, but you can see here what some random chaos is what I call it. So you can see that. This other one, I call this Gold Stream, but you can see how I'm using 3D trails with the actual, with some clones. Sorry about my node graphs. You know, a lot of the times when I'm doing this stuff, I'm just like literally freestyle making it. You know, I'm not really thinking about making it look nice on my node graph. I'm worrying about making it look nice in my viewport. But eventually, you know, I'll go back and kind of fix that. So you can kind of see these effects here. You know, pretty cool stuff. This one, you know, I really like this one. Simple, nothing crazy. It's just, you know, it's clones and trails. It's a little bit of HDRI. Here's another one. This one I'm also, I believe, proceduraling. And I'm also emitting from the mesh. If you can see here, I'm emitting from the mesh and it's kind of doing some, whoops. Let's see what else we have. This is one of my favorites that I've been working on. You know, it's kind of like fuzzy and weird. Not sure what it is, but you can kind of see. You can start seeing definition with lighting. You start seeing more of that face definition, and you know, yeah, it's pretty cool. You know, it's I love just staying still and seeing what the particles do. And this is one that I was working on today. And with this one, what I have is, again, it's another procedural one. And I have, I believe in there, a turbulence effector. So what happens is, once I go inside that turbulence effector, you can kind of see it being turbulent. Let me turn off the bounding boxes. This is another random one. I'm just doing some like beat pulse with some cloner extrusion. So with this one, I'm just taking particles and I'm adding a cylinder that actually does a quick beat pulse with the modifier. And you know, you're getting this like stick figure-y type of effect. This is also a new one. This one's really slow though, because it's a field. So this one's running at 15 to 30 FPS on my computer. So definitely not real-time performant, but it looks really, really cool. It's kind of like a chalky effect. You know, it's really, really nice. This one to me, I was kind of calling this one like a snow angel, because you can kind of create like this snowy, angel-y effect. You know, this one's done with particles as well. So I'm doing particles in fields, and what I'm doing is I'm emitting, you know, particles with SPHs and kind of creating this fluidy, watery effect that just falls down. Similar. So yeah, that's pretty much it on this subject. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Actually, one important thing not to forget is if you guys are planning to render these looks out, make sure that you render them at 30 FPS, or if you want to get a video render, because what happens is, if you're running your simulation at 60 and the frames are only 30 FPS from the Kinect, it renders them really, really fast. What I mean is a motion gets multiplied by 2, and it looks like you spud up the motion. So in order for this to look good and render it, when you're rendering it, make sure you render it at 30 FPS. Lock your frame rate to 30, and render it at 30, and you should get a smooth effect. That way, you don't get it moving really, really fast in fast speed. But yeah, I think that is going to be it. If you guys have any questions, please ask me. I can answer any of those. If you guys need help, I will be posting this file on my Gumroad for you guys to have. And yeah, any questions, let me know. If I miss something, make sure you comment it, or let me know. That way I can let people know that. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the Kinect on how you can use it within Notch. If you guys have any more questions, just please ask, and I'll go ahead and make a post about this later and kind of share that file, and yeah, people can start playing with it. There's also some sensor data that I have available on my Gumroad as well that you can download. All this stuff is free, so go to my Gumroad, Gumroad Bertomora. You can find me there, and you can start seeing a lot of the Notch stuff that I post there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks everyone that watched this, and I really appreciate you guys checking it out, and I hope you guys learned something from this. It was great doing it. Thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and finish the stream, but whatever questions you have, like I mentioned, just go ahead and ask.